So you
I
can
know
help.
that. I know that. She takes the highest credit because she
Absolutely.
shapes
So
the entire system. I can put
yes,
it like
I'll
that.
just go for the other meeting and join in soon.
yes, ma'am. Absolutely. Please go ahead.
Yeah.
So, ma'am, should we get started? We already have a good number of students and others can join in. So, because I think they have a class again from 12:30.
Yes, yes,
So,
yes, yes, yes. So, a small brief introduction. I know I will not be justifying if I just speak few lines about Pia ma'am. Okay, Pia ma'am is a bridge builder with 24 years of experience in the field of investment banking and finance, transformational ethics, cultural sensitization, HR intervention, millennial management. Ma'am, what is that millennial management? Sorry.
the generation after Generation X is called millennials, those who are
Okay.
currently in the age group 23 to 35.
Okay.
So there have been corporate clients who had reached out that as to how you motivate them because
Wow.
the
So
Gen
we are
X
doing today millennial management, right, ma'am?
the motivations are very different. I think there might
Okay.
be Gen Zs also, ma'am, in this group. I'm just thinking
Yeah.
anyone less than 22 is a Gen Z.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, ma'am. Then sustainability themed living and life skills. I know Pia ma'am because I still remember the way she had introduced my BFL, which was one of the innovations that was really been appreciated by the Westlark team. And that was the first year I still remember when we had started with that innovative teaching skills and all that. And the way when Pia ma'am talks, that is one which just it's a magnetic energy, a different type of magnetic energy which really grabs all the minds, pulls all the minds, and we can't hear anything else except Pia ma'am, because her voice modulation, the way she talks, wow, it's just superb. And I really die sometimes, not even love, but I die to hear her sometimes, that yes, at least once in a year I should hear you, because that creates a kind of motivation. And I think today's day would be the best day for motivating everybody to getting back into the system, though we are thrown out of it. So yes, ma'am, the stage is yours. Please, ma'am.
Thank you so much, Meenal ma'am. And you've been too kind, too generous. That just shows the love and appreciation that you and your colleagues have for me and for the Westlark team. Thank you. But students, ma'am has been overtly generous. So please don't place me on a pedestal. I'm just a regular human being like everybody else, and we all have our own domains of work. It's just that. And some of us, touchwood, we are privileged to work in an area we love. Yes, like ma'am said, I'm a former investment banker. My MBA is in finance, but this is my passion. So that's what I've been doing for the last couple of decades. And working with students, I don't think there's anything better than that in terms of the joy that you have. So just to get it started, students, we were having a little discussion sometime back, and Shweta ma'am and I were chatting as to how challenging it is for y'all at this point of time to again readjust to the way things are. So let's begin with a tiny exercise. I'd like you all to use the chat box and write one word to describe your state of mind as of now. Okay, this is not for the staff members. My apologies. It is only for the students. Students, I'll repeat the question. Let's write our state of mind in one word. Okay, so Veena, you have started it off. Thanks for sharing. Depressed. Prathamesh, okay, confused. Nitin, yes, bemused. Me as well. Yes. Sahil, complicated. Absolutely. Nidhi, stressed. Gayatri, anxious. Okay, Sanika, you've said calm, angry, lockdown, I know, demotivated, tired, stressed. Chilled, Siddhi, good for you. You are in a different zone, good for you. Gauri, lethargic, many of us are feeling that way. Anisha, angry. Okay, calm, stressed, confused, sleepy. Yes, Roshni. In fact, a lot of what you all shared, by the way, thank you so much. More things are coming in. Cool, that's interesting, Bhavesh, good for you. Demotivated, frustrated. Nitin, get well soon. That's all I can say. And believe me, we are all in the same boat at different levels. Frustrated, lazy, yes. You can see the kind of, if I might use the word, the bhelpuri of emotions that emerges. And we know in a bhelpuri, you have the sour and the sweet and the tangy. You also put in little chilies. But imagine if you put any one thing in too much of quantity. Imagine if you put too many chopped green chilies or too much of the sour element, you know that it is going to boomerang against your tongue. Your tongue is not going to like it. Your body is not going to like it. Unfortunately, we are dealing with a state of life where that is what has been happening to all of us. Definitely for the students, it is even more challenging than it is for the grown-ups, those of us who are teachers, faculty, etc. And the reason is, students, you need to know the prefrontal cortex of your brain is still developing. So I'm giving you now the neuroscience reason. You can feel a little happy about it and pat yourself in the back. If you've been feeling stressed or anxious or frustrated or worried, and you know it's because of the circumstances, please know it is not only because of the circumstances, it is also because your coping skills are not fully matured as yet. Science tells us that till the age of 25, the front part of the brain is still developing, which means many actions like what decision should I take, which is not impulsive, not risky, but balanced. How do I stay calm and not get triggered? These things come to us only in due course of time. Now, what does that mean? It means, like in the present situation, when there is a challenge, chances are you may find yourself getting triggered a little faster compared to some older people around you. Now, there is no guarantee. I have met teenagers who are very sorted and calm, they're like yogis, whereas you have people in their 30s who are hyper and all over the place. So, that can also happen. Age is not a guarantee. But science tells us that the brain is still developing. So, what is a suggestion for all of us who are feeling what we are feeling? Obviously, there's no one magic pill. What we need to remember is something very simple, but which calls for training. So, the first suggestion I'll make before even getting into today's topic of campus to corporate is this: identify and label your emotion and see your emotion as separate from you. What that means is, take the analogy of the ocean and the waves, and you know waves rise and fall, but the ocean is always calm. And the ocean is the base. So, similarly, in our minds, waves of thoughts and emotions rise and fall. There are times we are angry, then there are times again we are calm. There are times we are frustrated or anxious. There are times again we become optimistic. Label each of these, watch your mind when it is happening, and know that you are not the emotions. Now, some of us may say, isn't that obvious? Why is man telling us this? It is not so obvious actually, because a lot of us mix our emotions with our identity. Someone who gets angry with high frequency thinks I am an angry person. So yes, I can see what you've written, Megha. That's right. Confusion is high and confusion is there across the board, right from little children to those who are in their 40s and 50s and even older. The first thing when you want to manage these emotions, especially the ones which are not positive, those of you who said chilled, etc., that's fine. If you're cool about things, that's wonderful. But if you're not, don't berate yourself. Learn to see that the emotions are valid, number one. And number two, learn to see the emotion as distinct from yourself. Don't mix your identity with the emotions that are rising and falling. That's like the ocean saying, oh, this wave is nice. Oh, no, the next wave is not so pretty. Oh, this wave is very small. The last wave had been taller. Don't get into that comparison. An emotion is an emotion, especially when you're trying to manage and regulate the negative emotions. Please note, we're not using the word control, because trying to control an emotion is like to control 100 charging runaway horses. We're only going to get tired and frustrated. We are not going to be able to succeed. But management, yes. Regulation, yes. And the way to do that is to use the smart little trick which calls for training. Label your emotion, see your identity as different, and accept your emotion. You're going to realize once you accept your emotion, it disappears the way a rain cloud disappears after the water of the rain has fallen on the earth. That's called validation. In psychology, we call that validation. So if you're upset about something, or let's say you're overtly upset about something small happened at home and you just flared up, please know that yes, this can happen and it's happening more in the present times. We all know why. First, accept yourself for that. Don't think you're a flawed person or imperfect person. We are who we are, and every individual is unique and special. Again and again, our Shastras and Upanishads have told us that each human being has got infinite potential. Now, did they mean you have to be a perfect person for that? Obviously not, and that's not possible. Nobody is there. Nobody means nobody, not even the enlightened masters, because at a human level, their bodies and minds will have what we see as flaws or imperfections. That does not come in the way of happiness, however. So our whole focus becomes about finding balance, equilibrium. With this context and this background in mind, given today's little discussion that we've been having, I'm going to take us forward now into the more pertinent topic of campus to corporate. And let me share with you some slides. I'll also briefly tell you what is it that we have planned. Today, I'm going to start off with first looking at what we call the Ikigai concept. And then we'll get into what is the aspect of body language and grooming when you're presenting yourself online, because all of you are either having or will have online interviews, online group discussions. And then we'll dwell a little bit on group discussions and case discussions. There's going to be a follow-up session next Saturday, which will be on interviews. I would strongly suggest, at least to those of you who are here, please do attend the second session as well, which is going to be exactly a week from now, because that will take today's topic forward for those of you, especially who are third-year students. So let me share my screen with you. And this is what we are discussing today. These are the overall points we have in the two sessions, today's as well as on the 15th of January. So let's get started with the macro concepts. Oh, and before I proceed, students, please keep paper and pen next to you. If you have a question, write it down. If some of you would like to take screenshots, you're welcome to do so. However, science tells us, neuroscience again tells us that when we jot down something, we actually remember better, because the process of writing triggers brain impulses in different parts of the brain as compared to anything that is in the digital mode. So we begin with a very fundamental understanding. What is unique about us? So this is a tiny exercise that I'd like you to do. Some of you might have done it earlier, because last year we've interacted in July and some of us might have been present for that session, but it's still worthwhile doing it again. Let's take 3 adjectives to describe ourselves, positive adjectives, please note, of which I'd like you to write 1 adjective in the chat box. I repeat, choose 3 adjectives, positive ones, good ones, to describe yourself. And out of the 3, choose any one that you feel is most representative of you. Use that in the chat box. I'm just going to come out of the slideshow mode and we'll take a few moments time for this. Ask yourself, what is it that's unique, distinctive, and good about you? What is it you're good at? What is it you enjoy? Or if you want to use general adjectives to describe yourself, I'm determined, I'm curious, I'm cheerful, I'm always optimistic, I leave it to you. Let's see if we have answers coming up. Good, Nitin, you have put up empathetic, that's lovely. Gayatri, you've written all 3, punctual, kind, and enthusiastic. Good for you. Rahul, adaptable. Nidhi, achieving. Good. Interesting to see the answers that are coming. Okay, Yasira, you've talked about being positive. Good answer. Committed. Okay, good, Nitin. Lakshmi. Okay, it's. I'll just track back a little bit and see. Lots of answers coming in. Cheerfulness is coming in. Aditya, I'm not sure what you meant by that. I think you need to just clarify. Sobhaya, good, very good set of adjectives you have used. Let me just check again the answers. Krutika, that's good. Yasmin, adaptive is an excellent answer. In fact, those of us who feel we are adaptive or adaptable, that's going to be a key skill in this century. Akash, punctual. Imran, a good listener, excellent. Kshitija, confidence, very good. Vrunda, resilient. Vrunda, good for you, because this is again a tremendously important skill. Resilience, the ability to bounce back when you go through something difficult. Enthusiastic, relaxed, okay, polite, willing. Let me just see, friendly, confident, consistent, good. Sahil, again, consistency is very good, what you've written. Lakshmi, okay, good. You've given 3 adjectives, very nice. The motivated part is good. Great. I can see the speed with which you all have replied shows that these are things you all do believe yourselves to have, and that is excellent. Good. I can see what Siddhi and Achal have also put up. Good points. I'm so glad that you have this sort of self-awareness. Good, Megha. it's very heartening to see that you all did not overanalyze this, because when you overanalyze and think, okay, I think I'm creative, but am I really creative? Last year, someone gave me that task and I wasn't able to do it well. Then there's a problem. Top of your mind, what is it that comes? That's what you need to write. Okay, Bhavesh, good. Patience is definitely going to be something we need in large measures in the present situation and even later. And optimism, yes. Good. We'll stop this exercise at this point. What I would like you to do, all those of you who participated in this exercise, maybe you wrote in the chat box or maybe you chose not to write, that's perfectly fine. Please hold in your mind or write on a slip of paper, maybe on a little yellow post-it, these words which describe yourself and put it up somewhere where you can see it on a regular basis. Doing so allows you to actually assimilate your understanding of yourself. So, for example, when you say you're optimistic or you're cheerful, and let's say, God forbid, you're having a really bad day, one of those days when you wonder, why was I even born? What is this life all about? And you're super frustrated. That's when these adjectives serve as a kind of an anchor for you, and they hold you in place and they tell you, steady, this is temporary, things will pass. So it's my sincere suggestion to all of you, try and write down these adjectives on a little bit of paper or a post-it paper, like I said, put it up somewhere where at least once a day you're going to be able to see it. Or if you would prefer to have it as your mobile phone screensaver, you can do that too. Although I personally think putting it up on paper is a better idea, but that's your personal choice. Let me go back to my screen share and take you into a concept that many of you would be familiar with, but is still worth showing. The concept is called Ikigai. Although this particular concept comes to us from Japan, India has had the concept of Swadharma, which means your true nature, for several thousand years. However, right now we'll pick up this particular 20th century concept and talk about it. Why are we again discussing Ikigai? If any of you are wondering that, the answer to that is this helps us get clarity. Those of us who have a little bit of confusion or doubt, what should I be doing in future? Should I go for a job? Should I go for a master's? Oh my God, it's already January. If I don't have a job offer lined up, then what am I going to do? Or should I just sign up for some course and some study just to fill the time until I figure things out? Please do the Ikigai exercise. Now, what do we do in this particular exercise? You have 4 circles, as you can see from this picture. The first one you start off with is activities that you love to do. Now, the big assumption here is we're talking of healthy activities. So if you say, wow, I love binge watching on Netflix, that's not going to make it to this list. The second circle comprises things which you're good at, meaning subjects where you've had domain knowledge, expertise, skill sets which you have, certain tasks that you do well. Let's say you're good at working with people, you're good with projects, you're good with time management, you work well under pressure, or let's say you're good with budgets and planning, and you've taken part in extracurricular activities in college where you have been able to coordinate with people in this online environment beautifully. So all those things get listed here. I repeat, the subjects that you're good at also come here, whereas the subjects that you love will come in this circle. Now, some of them might be an overlap. I'll share with you my own example. I was good at finance and accounts. I still remember scoring full marks, 100 on 100 in accountancy, but did I love it? Definitely no. I loved business ethics, however, and I was also good at it, and I had prizes up to the university level. So that came in this central circle. Similarly, I loved econometrics, and I was good at it, so that came in the central circle, this part, this overlap region. Then come to this circle, which is what the world needs. And this is what the world is willing to pay for. There's a difference in these two. For example, the world needs people to be, let's say, social activists or volunteers, grassroots level change makers. But is the world ready to always pay for such things? Answer is no, not always. So this is the list of what is seen as a requirement in society, whereas this one is a more filtered down list of what you're willing to be, what society is willing to pay for. Our job is to find the overlap between these 4 circles. And that comes from doing the Ikigai exercise. So I'm going to strongly suggest, make a note of this term. Do not go to Google now. Check it out later. Simply take paper and pen Draw 4 circles which overlap. Something like this, if you can see this on camera. And at the center, you're going to get a zone where you have the convergence. This convergence is your sweet spot. So for many of us, for example, we began our careers doing not what we loved, but what we were good at and what the world needed and what society was willing to pay for. So that's our profession and that is what we do. Later on, for people like me who were fortunate enough, we were able to pivot and find things which were also what we love. And then you have the perfect convergence. Even if you have convergence of 3 circles out of 4, that's still very good. Now, what does this exercise do? If some of you are wondering that what ma'am is saying is fine, but how will this help me get a job? Or can I make sure that my first job falls within my Ikigai list? The answer is not always. But it's good to have clarity so that when you're taking a decision, you know what is going to serve you well. Sometimes our confusion doesn't arise because we don't know which choice to make as per the worldly metrics. The confusion arises because we don't know what choice to make as per what our mind wants. We don't know our minds well enough, which sounds very paradoxical, but it's true. So it's like a 3-year-old child who in one moment is saying, I don't want to eat food, and the next moment crying and howling, saying, I'm hungry, give me food. That happens to the grown-ups too. So then the question is, how are you going to align your Ikigai with your potential employer? The reason, therefore, for spending time on this particular exercise is, after today's session is over, please invest maybe 5 to 10 minutes of time in listing your Ikigai. With that list, when you start applying to companies or when you go for job interviews or you're sitting for a group discussion, you know how to pitch yourself. You know how to present yourself and your idea. So this is how the macro concept gets linked to the smaller detail. Now let's go forward from here into a little slide where I'm going to show you some fundamentals of mindset before we talk about campus to corporate. The first fundamental is what we call as I'm okay, you're okay. What this means is, irrespective of whom you meet and encounter in your online interactions with companies, you respect them for who they are and you respect yourself for who you are, although you may not agree with each other. You don't even have to like each other. You're going to meet plenty of people that you strongly dislike. I'm sure some of you already have had that experience. That's fine. But can you grant them the space to be who they are? Just like in the animal kingdom, you find there's such a stunning diversity. And we don't ask a hyena, why are you looking this way or why do you sound like that? We just accept that, okay, this is how the hyena is. In the same way, can we do that for people? I know it sounds almost a little disrespectful to be comparing humans to hyenas, but if any of you are smiling or laughing at this point, you know what I'm talking about. There's a whole range of people. There will be some people who are like tigers, as fierce. There are some people who will be as gentle as sheep. There'll be some people like elephants, slow and steady, but massive momentum, tremendous amount of energy once they put their minds to it. Some will be like the wolves and jackals and hyenas. Accept it, deal with it, grant people the space. The second, remember, affirmations are important because whatever is your present performance, that is not always indicative of your potential. Your potential is much higher. Third important point to remember, whatever labels either the world or you have put on yourself, those don't matter so much. What matters is now what is it that you choose to do with your life? Students, I can't emphasize enough how important this one point is. What happens is, unfortunately, we get stuck with certain negative labels, which maybe people have put on us or we have put on ourselves. Oh, so-and-so is not a creative person. Oh, so-and-so is got very little poor attention span, can't focus, can't concentrate. Oh, this person is someone who gets angry very fast. Oh, that person, no good when it comes to actually applying your brains and thinking about something. Who said that? How does it matter? Heard of a term called neuroplasticity? At every moment, there are so many cells in our body that are taking birth and coming alive, and there are older cells that are dying. It is up to us to program the software of those cells and bring in the vision that we want to bring in, which means you may have the dullest and most dim-witted of persons going on to achieve great things simply because he or she decided to do it. And therefore, the entire internal software programming worked accordingly. So you choose which past labels you want. Yeah, if they were good labels, supportive labels, if people said you're friendly, you're helpful, you're balanced, you're kind, you're empathetic, you're good to know in a crisis, let's say, or you're a good friend, a good listener, by all means, keep those labels with you and use them to inspire you in the moments when you feel down. The fourth thing, in the months that are there ahead for all of you, learn beyond the syllabus. Learn to look beyond the syllabus. Do not restrict yourself to only your academia when it comes to presenting yourself to the world. Because what the world needs is employability skills. And they need to see, therefore, what's your competence, which may or may not come from a textbook. And the fifth thing, which is very important, many of us feel overwhelmed when we have something big in front of us. Let's say a job search, or let's say applying for masters, either in this country or overseas. The trick to this is to break it down into small steps and to coax the mind and say, okay, now I'm just going to do this one thing. And after some time, you take a break after finishing that and you're happy, you listen to a song, you walk around and then tell yourself, okay, that went well. Now I'm going to try the next step and just do this. And that's it. I'll not do any more. And then do the next step. And then what happens is dopamine hormone starts to kick in. Now, many of you who have attended past Veslak sessions know about dopamine, or you might have even read about it elsewhere. That's the hormone that's linked to rewards. Effort reward cycle is dopamine linked. So the moment we start taking baby steps towards any goal, the brain starts rewarding us by making it seem more and more attractive the next time. In other words, the resistance towards doing things falls. So if there are any students out here who are procrastinators, if you like putting it away, and you believe in the opposite of that Kabir ka doha that said kal kare so aaj kar, etc., you believe in the absolute opposite of it, you're one of those just-in-time people, this one is for you. Change your habit, because this is crucial for your life. Rewire your brain by beginning to take that one step. Let that step be small. Yesterday, I was having a conversation with a 23-year-old who said that if I do something in lesser time, it might be a slightly bad job. He didn't use the word bad, he used a more explicit word. I told him that right now it is important for you to do it even if it is a bad job, because you need to get started with things. So this is what neuroscience tells us. Begin. Once that inertia is overcome, that Newton's laws of motion, I'm sure all of us remember, you will stay in that momentum. You will stay in that particular trajectory. Now we come to this segment of how we actually present ourselves online. What we have discussed so far were the macro concepts. These are the obvious ones. Some of you will be already familiar. We introduce ourselves with good morning or good afternoon. My name is so-and-so. We never say myself so-and-so. Please note, that's one of the most common mistakes made by Indians. We say myself so-and-so. It's not that. It should be my name is, not even I am, because you are not your name. Your name is whatever it is. Remember to keep the smile on Zoom. And when you're asked to introduce yourself, have 3 or 4 sentences ready in your mind. Which institute we are from, what are our qualifications, what are we applying for, what is our interest area. Now, what are the key aspects of body language, especially the ones which get reflected online? Please note that in this segment, student, my focus is going to be almost 80 to 90% on online interaction, because the assumption is your interviews are also going to be online. These are the 5 things which come through. Now, the very first thing some of you may wonder, how does posture matter when it is online? Can I not be slumped? The answer is no. If you're sitting like this in front of the camera and your spine is not straight, that's going to be visible. And there's a problem with that. Similarly, if your face is like this because you're nervous and you're tense and your eyes are like wide, deer caught in the headlights, we call it, there's a problem with that. If the eye contact is not with camera, but you're looking elsewhere and you're fiddling with your phone and you're looking at the paper and then looking to see, do I have a glass of water near me? Again, there's going to be a problem. So look right into the camera. Think the camera is a close friend of yours, someone that you're happy to see, let's say. Or if you have a family member whom you're very close to, see your father or mother or sibling or whoever as if that person is there, and keep that eye contact. The voice is very important again. In a normal way of talking, there is high pitch and low pitch. Emotions come in. We pause at certain time. Do not use what is known as fillers. Fillers are all those sounds or words which we put in, like basically, means, actually, when we are thinking of something, but we don't want to let the listener know that we're thinking of something. It doesn't work. After a while, it gets very irritating for the listener. And your gestures. Today, for example, right now, I'm being a little informal with my gestures, and you can see my hands move. If this were to be a formal interview, A, my fingers would always be close together, not splayed. And secondly, my hands have to be closer to my body. If my gestures are like this, it's going to look almost scary in front of the camera. So be very mindful. In the real world, when we make gestures, we have about 1 to 1.5 feet of space around ourselves to play with for the gestures. But in the online world, you have barely 6 inches of space within which your hands need to stay when you are gesturing. Otherwise, there's a problem. Take a look at this photograph, and I'm not even going to ask you to use a chat box. It's very evident that there are several errors that are happening here, right from the facial expression, the tugging of the earlobes, the lack of eye contact in the first one, also the alignment and the posture, and last but definitely not least, the background that is there. Now, this one is a little harder to spot, and I'll help you all out by telling you all what is the error here. There is a major problem. Whoever is viewing this person is going to have a close-up of that person's chin and mouth and maybe part of the nostrils. The angle is all wrong. And many of us have found this happening during our Zoom or Google Meet interactions. Beware. You need to have your camera at more or less eye level. A little bit up or down is okay, but not too much of a difference. Now we come to a few slides where I'll just take you through some of the aspects of body language we need to be more mindful about in the online world. The first thing you need to know is that gestures and eye contact becomes more exaggerated, meaning in the real world, what you do seems more diluted, whereas in the online world, looking away becomes very starkly noticeable. Similarly, a gesture that's in the air again becomes starkly noticeable. Facial expressions are visible, and obviously lower body gestures or the posture is not visible. So there are people with this nervous habit of forever shaking their legs. Thankfully for you, that's not visible on camera. But if you're not stable and calm, the energy and vibe that you have is going to be different. And in some way, indirectly, that gets communicated to the person listening to you and seeing you, which you don't want. You want to come across as calm and alert. Now here you have the example of how posture is indirectly evident. We've talked about this. And para-language and vocal pitch become important because there are other language cues not happening. For example, how you sit or stand in a real physical interview that is no longer visible fully. Therefore, the vocal language takes a lot of importance. If somebody is nervous, he or she will be also conveying the nervousness in the manner of speaking. We may start stuttering, we may start stumbling, we may have more of coming in. The throat may turn dry and we may need to sip water, etc. So the voice and the manner of talking begin to reflect the mind state. The simplest suggestion for all of us is take a few deep breaths before you get into an online interview or group discussion. And of course, it goes without saying that you've done your homework, you've done your preparation. You can't just go blank, no preparation, and then say, okay, in Veslak, Priya ma'am told us take some deep breaths, so that's what I'll do. And hey, presto, I'm ready for the GD. No, we're not. So make sure that you have a calm demeanor being conveyed. Now, just take a look at these two pictures and you can make out what I was just now telling you about gestures a little while back. In this particular picture, you can see the way the lady has held her hands. This is closer to the camera. Now, the problem with this is it looks as if the person is sort of coming right at you. Whereas here, what she's doing is far more discreet, far more subtle. She's deciding to say a hello with a wave that's closer to her body. Remember, gestures need to be closer to your body when it's the online world. In the physical world, like we said, you have almost 1 to 1.5 feet of space within which you can make your gestures. In terms of the logistics, you can see here there are some errors that are happening. And this one is much better in terms of those errors not being there. These are obvious. So I'm just going to dwell on one particular point, which is that of background. Keep your background neutral. You can use the blurring option, like on Zoom, for example, we have that. In general, avoid using virtual backgrounds. And you know the reason, when the person moves, you have the edges breaking up. And that can be extremely irritating and also distracting to the person who's trying to listen to your answers in an interview. Avoid having virtual backgrounds. But suppose you have no option. Let's say you've got a very cluttered kind of background, and that's the only place close to the router, etc., where you can sit. Then no problem, get in a virtual background, but make sure you don't fidget and you don't do this. Because if you do this, there'll be parts of your body that seem as if they're breaking off and then again rejoining, which we don't want, obviously, in such a session. Take a look at these pictures, and the first point of the slide gets understood. Lighting. The lighting has to fall on your head and your face. It can't be behind your head and your face. Again, obvious reasons. This is common sense, but as we know and we have all been seeing, common sense is not always common. I'll just digress for a moment to tell you about how, of course, this was during the early times where somebody very senior was part of a meeting. I was a part of that meeting. And that person was blithely unconcerned or maybe completely oblivious to the fact that the camera was at the wrong angle. Not only was he eating during the meeting, he happened to be in informal clothes. He happened to be sitting in the bedroom. And there were times when he would bring it. He was on phone, actually. He couldn't hear very well. He would bring the camera with the video on closer to his ears in order to listen well. And you can imagine what the rest of us got to see. So just be mindful. The camera catches more than what we give it credit for. The other points are very obvious. Point 6, common sense. Be undisturbed at the time of a corporate interaction. But suppose you have a sibling coming in, or if you have a pet at home and the pet decides to make its appearance, or your mother or father are going to the kitchen to get some water or do some work, don't look at them like that and say, like, shoo, go away. It doesn't matter. All of us are living in these strange times, and we all know that this is the reality of our lives. There are so many times I've interacted with people and there's the whistle of a cooker in the background, or you can hear a little child crying, or you can hear some other domestic sound. That's perfectly fine. You don't have to feel embarrassed about it or maybe anxious or think, oh my God, please, this is bad. I'm not giving the right impression. If you have a spare room where you can sit and be undisturbed, that's great, because mentally you don't want to be distracted. But if that is not possible in your circumstances, no problem at all. Don't think that your marks get deducted on account of these distractions which are there. They don't. The last point is fairly obvious, and you know why. Everything should be here. You should not need to have anything here at all. And having something on paper in front of you, it does not convey authenticity. That's not being honest, and it doesn't convey the right values at all. So strictly avoid doing it. I'll quickly show you some photographs in the next 3 slides. So there is a certain amount of formality we keep when we have interactions on interviews, etc. But that doesn't mean you have to be all stiff and you can't smile. You can smile, of course, if the context permits. You can talk in a light-hearted manner, but go with the context, go with the people, your reading of the situation. There are different colors which go well in a job interview. And I'll take you to the next slide to tell you. Normally in a physical interview, this would have been fine. But if it is an online interview, you need to wear brighter colors. Of course, in this picture, the lady is wearing red. I personally don't suggest bright red, but I would say any color that is your color, you feel happy in it, confident in it. It can be blue. Blue is a very safe color, by the way, internationally. So even if you're applying for international internships or jobs or overseas studies, blue is a great color to use. You want to use yellow, etc., please go ahead and do that. For the ladies of this group, you want to use reds. And in fact, you have a much wider color palette. Go right ahead. Make sure that you can carry it off confidently. You shouldn't wear a bright color and then wonder, is this looking too much for me? If that thought comes to your mind, then change that. Don't wear it. For example, today I've chosen to wear what I call an aubergine colored sari, which is mostly plain but has some embroidery. Now I'm getting away with it and giving myself leeway because here I'm taking the session. But if I were an interviewee, I would have chosen a different color, a more traditional color like a blue or a green or something, and it would have been plain. It would not have had prints or embroidery or any digital block prints, etc., which can distract the eye. Why? Because you want the focus to be there with the words. After having seen the first two segments, now we get into our little discussion about what is a group discussion or a case discussion. Many of you are already familiar, many of you have already gone through this. So for you, it might be a little bit of a reminder. Just bear with me and let's stay patient. So what it's supposed to be is something like this. What it usually becomes is very often this. And this is true even in the online world. Although I must say, my experience of conducting, I'm a panelist in case discussions at a certain MBA institute for, I think, the last 18 years or so. There are very interesting things I find. I find in physical case discussions and group discussions, there is more of aggression. In the online world, it seems to be a little bit better. People seem to be following the etiquette some more. Now, in the next 3 slides, I'm going to show you some of the key traits and aspects that the listeners are noting, your assessors are noting, and also what your strategies should be. So take a look at this slide. Just read this slide. Please note the best of companies when they use a group discussion or case discussion in order to eliminate their, let's say, the applicants and reduce the numbers and distill it down. They are actually looking for most of these traits. And top of the list is leadership. But leadership, sometimes we have very restricted notions about what that word means. We think that it means if I'm a leader, others should agree with what I'm saying. That is not necessarily true. In the context of a group discussion, leadership quality means being able to steer the discussion towards a productive direction. Because there are lots of times where it goes off track. The whole conversation goes off track. You need somebody who gets it back to the right track, or somebody who says, okay, these are 5 different perspectives. Can we put it all together? So the person who can synthesize, the person who can build on and leverage on other people's points, the person who can say, okay, we have 2 different opinions here. Can we pick up whatever is convergent from these 2 opinions? That person is displaying leadership qualities as far as this context is concerned. The other points are fairly simple, so I'll just let you take a good look at it. Please note, this point has to be dealt with very carefully. When we say a person should have conviction and firmness, it means you believe in what you're saying and therefore you can stand by it. You can give reasons to justify why you're taking a certain stance. However, this doesn't mean one should be inflexible or rigid. Now, there's a very thin line between being convinced about something versus being rigid about something. In conviction, we go with logic and reasoning. We go with facts and data. In inflexibility, we say, I have made up my mind and that's it. I do not change my mind at all. So you know at the bottom of your heart in which category you are when you take a certain stance on something. If you're going with the data given to you and then you're very sure about something and you're saying it, you're showing conviction. Or let's say someone in your group has countered your point by giving something else as data. Then you need to be flexible and say, okay, this is interesting and this is a new insight for me. Perhaps we could link it to our previous understanding and so on and so forth. You take it from there. On this slide, I'm just going to give you, this is like the distilled advice or suggestions you can say, the strategies to keep in mind if you want to do well in a group discussion. The first one is try and be an early initiator. That doesn't mean you have to start it off. Be the second or the third person. Now, is that easy? Not always, which means you should be ready to begin, but you're not beginning. And the moment the first person has started talking, you're ready with your point, but you're also listening. Because you don't want to only jump in and make your point. You want to build on what he or she has said. Unfortunately, a lot of people who start off the group discussion start off in a very lame manner. I'm sorry to sound disrespectful, but after having listened to a lot of group discussions, this is what I find, that 60 to 70% of the initiators will usually just paraphrase what the topic is and then say, okay, friends, we need to discuss this, etc. And in your head, and you're telling that person, okay, thanks for nothing, because that person has just taken up airtime, which is very precious and limited, but not really made an effective point. There are exceptions who not only begin by saying what the topic is, but more important, they give it a structure. And they say, okay, let's discuss with respect to A, B, C. That's a structure. So initiate with a structure in mind. The other points, I'll just take it forward from here. The first two are separate. That's why I've listed them as 1 or 2. The others are subsidiary points. Point 2 here, which is listening well. This is very crucial. Many of us in a group discussion get so hyper and anxious because we know that we have to speak 4 times, 5 times, 6 times based on the duration of the segment given to us. We forget to listen. We are like warriors at the edge, and they're just waiting for that little split-second pause in order to jump in. Nothing wrong with that. But the one who has what we call in Urdu as teherav, a sense of calmness and equilibrium, who has his or her points ready, but is also listening to the points being made by others and can build on that and link it, is the one who does really well. Again, many things here are fairly simple and obvious, so I'm not going to explain them. There is a thin line between being firm and being obnoxious. There are people who, like I said while showing you the previous slide, can come across as very inflexible, and that goes to the point of rudeness. We don't want rudeness to be displayed. Firmness, great. Rudeness, no. Now, there's a common question that I get asked, that how do you come into the group discussion when already 3-4 people have spoken? So on this slide, I'm going to show you a few sentences and words which are relatively rare, which normally in the coaching classes they don't tell you, but which are super effective. The first is, may I ask you a question? Or can I please ask you to clarify that? Do you mean this or do you mean that? Because if you're saying this, then the implication is this. If you're saying that, the implication is that. The moment you raise it as a question, even before the person has answered, you're able to make your point. Another way which is used by some people is adding to your point. The third one, personally, I don't like this very much. A lot of people will say, yes, yes, I completely agree with what you're saying. And then they add something of their own. You want to say, come on, that doesn't sound authentic at all. It's not that you completely agree with what the person is saying. You're just trying to find a polite way to butt in. A better strategy is to say, building on what so-and-so person just now said. It could be with reference to names or numbers. Based on your group discussion, you'll be referring to people either using their names or there are numbers, participant numbers, so-and-so, or whatever. Another interesting and unique way to edge into the conversation is to say, what this person said is very correct, and that raises a certain question in our minds, and then take it from there. Now, for all of these, as you can understand by now, you need to be a little mentally agile. And some of us are blessed, some are born that way, some of us will have to work at it, and some of us do both. We are blessed with a few of these traits, but we also work at it. So what should all of us be doing? Practice. The more you practice, the better you get, and the easier these strategies become. And then you don't have to think about it. You don't have to think, okay, what was that ma'am had suggested the last time? It becomes second nature. It's a skill that you have perfected. It's like how you have learned, let's say as a child, to ride the cycle without training wheels. Initially, you were stumbling and wobbling and going all over the place. And then one fine day, it became very normal. And today, if you have to ride a cycle, you're not even going to think twice about it. It'll come to you almost in an automatic manner. So that is what happens with practice. Take a look at this last slide for today. I have shared with you 6 points. These are the key points that I've distilled from my experience of interaction with students and trainees. The first is greeting people and smiling, basic courtesy and manners. The second point to remember is, if you bide your time too long in the beginning, you may not be able to enter easily afterwards, because after the first 4 or 5 people talk, they will again want to come in and again want to come in and make their points repeatedly. Almost in every case discussion, I have been a panelist for, there will be one unfortunate member who has not had the chance to open his mouth or her mouth at all. That happens. Sometimes it's more than one. And they're just looking around, very forlorn, very woebegone, and your heart goes out to them. You feel sorry for them, but there's nothing you can do. You have to come in ideally at points 2 or 3, speaker 2 or 3. 3 is obvious. Number 4 is something that some of us forget in our enthusiasm. If the case discussion topic given to you is something you feel strongly about, you may be tempted to straight away jump to solutions. Don't do it. Start off the discussion by giving a structure for analysis, then synthesize the points, then work towards solutions. Use language which is authentic and collaborative, but avoid saying my friend when you're referring or talking about someone, because that person is not your friend, that person is your competitor. And we all know that. I don't know where these things are taught, perhaps in coaching classes. With all due respect to them, they do what they do. Do not get into that. Just say what this person referred to and then build on that. Body language wise, don't allow your anxiety to take away your smile. So if you're a nodder, like I happen to be a nodder as a student, I have always been a nodding kind of student. Let the nods be there. It's very reassuring body language for the person who's talking at that point of time. And normally there's going to be a gallery view. Sometimes we use the speaker view. So if somebody is talking and that person notices that you are nodding or you're paying attention and listening well, chances are he or she will start directing his points towards you. And that makes you, in a very subtle way, a kind of a leader for the group. Good listeners have the potential very easily to be good leaders for the group. So all those of you who use the chat box exercise in the beginning to say that you're good at listening, great for you, because chances are very high you're going to be able to leverage that. So on that note, we're going to be stopping for today, and we will just take up, I'll just come out of the slideshow mode. We will take up a few questions. Let me quickly recap for you what we have done. We, of course, started with a general conversation. I'm not recapping that. That's not relevant to us. We spoke about our structure. We got into the first segment where we asked ourselves, what is our unique value proposition? What are we good at? Then we got into our Ikigai exercise. We spent some time understanding this. We also asked ourselves how we can use this Ikigai every time we interact with a company. Then I shared with you 5 little reminders for our mindset, that when we start off our interaction, what should we keep in mind? Then we went to the second segment, which was all about how we present ourselves online. We spoke about the introduction, the body language essentials. I showed you these pictures. We talked about 2 slides where we said what parts of our posture are more exaggerated and which are the parts that are not visible. Then we saw 2 slides on the logistics. What should be the distance, the height, the angle, etc. Things such as internet backup, that's fairly obvious. The background is what we really dwelt on. The lighting, space around us, keeping things handy next to us. Then we saw these photographs and I said, you use bright colors, but colors which you're confident and comfortable about. If red is not your color, don't go for red. If blue or green or yellow or pink is your color, go for that. Wear something where A, you look a little bright on camera, and B, you feel cheerful, you feel happy and confident. At the end of the day, it's just about being comfortable. And if you say, ma'am, for me, it's a white shirt or a white dress that works, no problem, go for it. Normally, why we don't recommend white or cream is because in a camera, if the background is neutral, you need to wear a pop of color in order to come across as a contrast. But this is not a hard and fast rule. Please keep in mind, it is not a hard and fast rule at all. So this was our recommendation. And then we got into group discussions. And we saw these 3 slides. We went into the strategies and I talked about what is known as conversation sliders. And then we are ending today with this little set of 6 reminders as to what to do and not do when it comes to group discussions. So I'll just stop the share. And okay, so Sejal, you've asked, can you wear a black shirt? Perfectly. What I would suggest is add a pop of color by having, let's say, a scarf which is cream or light yellow or something like that. Black is fabulous. It's a power color. And if that is your color and you feel good in it, you can own it well, go for it. Like I said, you need to feel comfortable with it. But I will suggest have a pop of color with it. And especially for women, for the ladies of this batch, you have that option. For men, it gets a little more restricted. Yes, Nitin, this recording will be put up on YouTube. So don't worry if you feel there was something that you missed out. Anushka, could we just make sure the recording is shared on YouTube? Okay. Maybe right now she's not able to reply to us. We'll make sure that this goes up on the Westlark channel. So Nitin, please be in touch with your institute, and also please check the official Westlark YouTube channel. This will get uploaded in a few days' time. Sejal, most welcome. Yeah, so Anushka ma'am has written that it will be uploaded. Most welcome, Nitin. Anushka, can we share with them the Google feedback form, please? So I will request you all to take a few moments of your time, just a few moments, to let us know if you feel this last 1 hour of interaction has been useful for you. Please let us also know your suggestions. If you want other topics to be covered by Westlark, we'll be happy to do so. Please let us know that. So just fill up the form, and also we're there. Check out our YouTube channel. We're also there on Facebook. We're there on Instagram. So although we don't advocate social media, but then social media can be useful sometimes for giving ourselves good brain food. So as long as you're using your time in a constructive manner, within boundaries, and you're feeding your mind with good things, you can always go for it. Let's see if there are any more questions. If anyone else has any last questions, please go ahead and ask. Okay, I don't see any more other questions coming up in the chat. Does anyone want to share any experience of an interview that you've had or a group discussion you've had? Please feel free to unmute and speak if you want to do so.